Welcome to Digital After Dark with your hosts, Matt and Andrew.
Hello, and welcome back to another Digital After Dark. As always, I'm here with Matt. Very quiet, so for those who are not watching on YouTube. And then today we have a guest. It's Andrea Bonzini. Hopefully I'm saying that
Bronzini,
correct.
yes.
Perfect.
Hi, guys.
So today's guest is someone who sits at the intersection of data governance and digital experience, a practitioner who has spent years helping organizations turn messy, inconsistent analytic setups into clean, reliable, decision-ready systems. Andrea is a digital analytics consultant and data governance specialist, known for his ability to simplify complex measurement problems and build frameworks that actually scale. He's worked across industries, helping teams implement robust tracking, improve data quality, and create governance models that reduce ambiguity and increase trust in the numbers. Additionally, Andrea created a free open-coded experimentation platform that allows you to run A/B tests directly inside Google Tag Manager without needing a separate experimentation tool called GTM Split. Additionally, the lovely website we're seeing on here is also built by Andrea, and it's going to be a topic that we're going to be covering. Andrea, thank you for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me.
So let's just dive straight in because we're all seeing this great website with Noise Explorer. So let's talk about something every analytics team feels, but almost nobody talks about openly: noise. Noise is that invisible force that sneaks into your dashboards, your reports, your experiments, and quietly distorts reality. It's the difference between what you think users are doing and what's actually happening. Noise is the reason two teams can look at the same metric and walk away with completely different stories. It's why data-driven sometimes feels more like data distracted. And the tricky part is, noise rarely announces itself. It just sits there, blending in, shaping decisions, nudging roadmaps, and occasionally sending entire organizations on wild goose chases. So today, we're going to pull noise out of the shadows. Andrea, as an expert in filtering through the noise, I want to hand over to you to kick us off, to
Yeah.
really get us in what you believe is noise as well.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about noise. So, why are we talking about noise? Because the measurements we do with conversion rate and KPIs in general, so they're part of the same family. They are affected by stochastic noise. Now, this is an error of measurement, but unlike the physical world, it behaves completely different. So when we say you are making an error in the measurement, people think, yeah, I know there is this measurement error, right? And for example, if you measure a table and you measure it 3 times, you are going to get more or less the same measure, right? So the error you make depends on the error of the instrument, the tool you are using, right? The table doesn't change the dimension. But stochastic processes are different and people don't grasp it. And I believe that to really understand what we are talking about, you need to see it. That's why I built a tool that actually makes you see the noise. And once you see it, you start to understand what the size of the error is. And the problem is that the size of the error is about the same order of magnitude of the changes we want to measure, right? If you want to measure, I don't know, an improvement in a conversion rate of 10%, but the error you're making in measurement is 20%, that's very hard, right? And this is what we are talking about when we talk about noise. And this topic is misunderstood, and even from top experts, it's it's like underappreciated. And what happens is that if you, for sure, you have run experiments. I mean, many people in the audience may have run experiments. You run experiments today, you let it run, Then you run the same experiment 2 months from now, and you get a completely different result, but you didn't change anything. And so people think, okay, traffic has changed, maybe user intent has changed, and there is all a bunch of reasons that we try to attribute to the difference in the result, right? But the reason really is noise. Nothing changed. It's just the nature of the stochastic process. So I want to show you this tool. Can you guys see the screen?
Yes.
Yes. All right. So in this tool, you see there is, here we have, this is a split test. In this example, you have the users in the control. It's like 12,000 people, and you have 480 conversions. And then in the variation B, you still have 12,000 people, and conversions you have 520. So this observation window is 28 days. So this is a 4 weeks experiment, okay? And so with these numbers, the observed lift is 8.33%. So B is better than A, all right? But now what this tool does, it will run with the same underlying uplift, which is 8.33%. It will run a measurement. So every day you get conversions, the underlying conversion rate is the same, but because of the process is stochastic, it's random, you will get different numbers. So you run the observation and you get this. Now, this run here that it's on the chart happens to pass at week 4 exactly in the same place where our original observation was. Does this make sense? You guys follow me?
Yes, up to a point.
So you see the run goes through here. But if I do it again, now this is close, but look at this. The third one, it's completely different. And I could have measured this instead of this. So let's run some more. You see this is minus 1%. Again, the true uplift is 8.3, all right? But this could have been a possible observation. So let's do another one. This is higher. This is more or less there. And if you do this in the tool, you start to quickly see how wide is the range of the noise. You see what happens? This thing looks like a trumpet. It's very wide in the beginning, and then it kind of gets slimmer with more traffic. So the more people you observe, the more you tend to get to the right conversion rate.
Yeah.
But in any case, like look at this one here, this observation is plus 26%. And again, the underlying, the real one is plus 8, while the bottom here is minus 8.7. And these are all possible measurements that you could have measured. But the problem is that you measure only once. So this should make you see the size of the problem. People are thinking like, we run an experiment, we measure the exact conversion rate, but no, you don't. You measure one of many possible outcomes, and these are the possible outcomes, and the range is very, very wide. And that's why people strive to get very large sample sizes. Does this make sense?
Yeah, because that was going to be my question. Because you would running an A/B test, you would never measure the actual uplift in conversion rate. You would measure the uplift in conversion rate versus the standard deviation, so the deviation from the mean, which would surely that takes into account, because that's the purpose of taking into account the noise, is you can view the observed uplift, but then in order to understand if it's a real uplift in conversion, you take
you take the deviation and then you cancel that out. So it's what is the uplift? That's why you do the A versus B. The A is control, B is the test.
Okay,
Both
here
have
here
little
what you're
noise.
seeing is already the lift. This is the lift, it's not the conversion rate. So it's already the difference between it. It's basically B divided A, and it's already on the chart. So this is already charted. And I
Does
can
it not
show
show-
you. Sorry?
But is that lift? But is that lift with deviation from the mean taken into account? Because
Yeah, sure. This is the difference between A and B, and this is how wide it gets. This is the real lift. It's not the conversion rate of A or B. So when I say that the observed lift is 8.3%, it means we know for sure that that is true. Like B is better than A. And I know because the system is generating the data, right? So this is something, it's the truth. In real life, you don't know the truth, and you're trying to understand it by running the experiments. But in this case, we know. And despite knowing it, if you run, if you generate, like basically what the software does, every user that comes, so 12,000 people, it just flips a coin with probability 8.33%. And that's when you convert, right? Does it make sense? So you have
it does.
conversions. Yeah.
Sorry, but what I'm not understanding is that when you actually measure real results, you don't just look at the conversion. I see what you're doing. You sort of reverse engineering it and saying if we were to get a lift of 8.3%, what could the actual journeys look like? But surely the purpose of looking at deviation from the mean and then saying, well, even considering deviation from the mean, so here is the mean average lifting conversion, here is how much the actual results deviated from that mean average conversion, even taking into consideration the deviation from that mean average conversion, this is the lift above that mean average conversion. Surely that is the actual lift. So you don't, I guess what I'm not understanding is when you're working backwards in this way, isn't that just demonstrating that actual journeys and actual conversion can be over and above the mean, which is why you seek a greater sample size in the first place in order to make you more sure.
Let me explain how this works in practice. So you have two processes here. You have one process that generates the conversions for A, and one process that generates the conversions for B. All right. So in this particular case, you have 12,000 people on both variations, so for A and B, but conversions you have 480 for A and 520 for B. All right. So these are two conversion rates. Okay. So the tool pretends that these conversion rates are real. They're not hypothetical. And it fixed the conversion rate. And then it generates users for A and B with that conversion rate. But because the process is stochastic, it's random, you don't get exactly the same conversion rate all the time. It wobbles. And then when you compare how many conversions you got in total on B and how many conversions you got in total on A, you get this sort of wobbling lines. Okay, look, I do it again. This doesn't go through the point we measured. This doesn't go through the point we measured. These are all real. They could have been measured, but they have not been measured because you run the experiment only once. But this means also that if you run it again, you will get for sure different numbers. So the result is, the consequence is that think about KPIs instead of A/B testing. KPIs is more common. How does it relate to A/B testing? Because KPIs, like you run it typically, it's weekly. So last week you have a number, and this week you have a different number. And you have a variation. That's like a split test, right? but it's with two different, basically same variation, but two different times, right? But when you compare them, people see, okay, this week we had an increase of 10% in this KPI, and they are happy. Like, oh yeah, we changed something, it worked. But no, it's not, because there is noise, and this number wobbles. So what this work I've done here, it serves to help you understand how much of the wobble is attributable to noise and how much is actually real data. And if you don't understand this, you are chasing ghosts. You're like, if the number goes down, okay, in reality, nothing changed. It's safe, and the movement is just because of noise.
So, for me to understand it, then the way that you would normally and sensibly with an A/B test, which is to take into account that noise, which is why you evaluate and require a certain sample size before you run a test, and then that's why you have a control versus a test, so that you're measuring the same time period. Because yes, time-based comparisons are inherently flawed because things change between one time period and another. But if you're measuring at the same time period and you're measuring Group A versus Group B, and you're taking into consideration the deviations from the mean within each group, and you're only measuring the uplift over and above the what is statistically significant, essentially, that is essentially sound. Like, we're not saying that there's something wrong with that. What we're saying is that businesses that are tracking KPI changes on very small time periods, and expect and basically panicking over a change from one week to the next, aren't necessarily taking into consideration the fact that noise just plays a part in KPI changes. Is that fair?
Yes, that's correct. And yeah, this noise is larger than we think. That's the entire point of this little tool here that shows you how big is the range of the noise.
So no, I think that's really good, and I like the way that the tool demonstrates that basically if you're tracking from one week to the next, so you see from zero to one, the element of noise is huge.
Yeah.
So actually,
Yes.
you need to be tracking over larger time periods to get a greater degree of accuracy. To what extent, in your opinion, analytics tools that do anomaly detection, for example, that attempt
They
to
don't.
give you a range?
They don't. Nobody is doing
Okay, good.
this.
So that's an interesting thing. I would like to hear more. I would like to hear more about that, because when I look in a tool like Google Analytics or Adobe Analytics and I see the upper and lower bounds that are essentially trained on a historic time period that are telling me what is outside of the range of what would statistically be expected over, say, if my training period is 30 days, and then suddenly I see a spike and that goes outside of the range of what would be expected, higher and lower above the
Yes,
conversion.
so this is correct, but the tools usually leave to the user the interpretation. You see the bands, yes, but nobody's telling you what to do with these bands. And most the users, they look at the point conversion rate, which is in this case 8.33, and they say, okay, like B is better than A, right? Now, let me show you one thing. We talked about statistical significance. Now, this here that you see now on the chart is the zero lift uncertainty, which means is the noise range if there was no lift at all. All right. So this means that when one run, these black lines we draw on the chart, when the run goes outside this gray area, then the result is statistically significant. Okay.
It's interesting because your observed lift of 8.3% is not outside of that range. So I would reject that result.
Exactly, that's correct. But now let me show you one thing, because this is really we are going to hit the nail here. So I run an observation. Look at this, like it it goes straight from there, and then it becomes statistically significant. Even here is a little bit on the line. This becomes later statistically significant. This never becomes statistically significant, and it's the same underlying data. So this is my point. Noise, basically what we are trying to do when we run an experiment or when we look at KPIs, we are trying to measure a ripple on the surface of the ocean. And noise is a wave that moves the surface. So if noise goes down, you can't measure the ripple because the ripple goes down. And if noise goes up, it pushes the ripple up. And then you measure, like you think it's statistically significant. Look at this. This one here, it's statistically significant from the start. And again, it's the same underlying lift.
Can I clarify a question for me? What does each one of these lines represent? And just kind of I posit something. Obviously, it's not one individual user because you can't. Is it basically grouping? Because I know that one statistical technique is grouping them into pots basically, and then measuring the pots. Is that
No. So if I switch to this, here you'll see the same thing. Here you see conversion rate. So I run an observation, and it's the same story. This is a conversion rate. Okay. This one, this other screen is lift, which is conversion rate B divided conversion rate A. So this is what you're seeing here. It's basically the representation of how lift, the measured lift, changes in time.
But time is the measure along the bottom.
Yes, you if you see the cursor here, you have days.
Yeah.
These are days on the x-axis, and then you have the lift on the y-axis. So
what is per line? So line 1 versus line 2 versus line 3.
This is just different draws of the same stochastic process. These are the things you could have measured. Like if you run the experiment today, you measure one thing. If you run it next week, you measure another thing, even if the process hasn't changed. And this is the striking insight, is that you don't need to change the traffic or the intent. It's the process that changes because it's random, even if the conversion rates don't move. And this is what people get wrong.
That's the thing that I'm struggling to get my head around, because I'm thinking about it from a very mechanical point of view. You have a certain number of people, they visit a website, for example, they convert. That's line number 1. What you're saying is that
No. It's in this chart. It's not line number 1. The line you see, it's the conversion rate of B divided the conversion rate of A. It's the lift. It's how much B is better than A.
What I mean is that there must be an underlying physical process that is generating those numbers. And I think what I'm trying to understand, and maybe I'm getting there quite slowly, is in my head you have users, you have conversions, and then you have lift A versus B, and then that's the thing that's moving. And what you're telling me is that this is not a representation of a real thing. What you're saying is that any one of these lines could have generated that lift.
Not quite. I'm saying that lift could have generated any one of this line.
Okay, so the other way around.
Yes. But let me make you an example. So you know that if you flip a coin, you have a 50-50 probability of getting heads or tails, right? But I'm sure you try flipping a coin, you don't get one head, one tail, one head, one tail. You can get 10 heads in a row, and then, I don't know, 3 tails, and then again 10 heads in a row, because it's stochastic. And this is the same thing. Even if the conversion rates are fixed, the outcomes are not. They are always wobbling. as the same thing as flipping a coin or throwing a dice. The probabilities are sound and real, but the outcomes are not. And this is what this tool shows you. And it's so hard to wrap your head around it, because we, in the physical world, we don't see this kind of processes. We just see a table, we measure it, and it's always the same length. So we can't understand it. And that's why we make mistakes. Does this make sense now?
It does. I think I'm probably still being a bit dim, but I think it does. I think what we're saying is that these lines don't represent real things that happened. It is that you're working backwards from a result and saying
I'm showing you what could have happened.
exactly what could have happened to result in the same result. So you're starting with the result, and what you're trying to illustrate is actually you think that result means this thing, but the result could have meant a number of these things. I guess a question for me would be, well, actually, I'm trying to think of what the question for me would be.
I understand. It's pretty upsetting when you see this thing and you start to realize, oh, okay, like we have been told a bunch of lies.
I don't think it's upsetting. I think it's very interesting. I think what I would like to see is, I guess you can see that the observed lift is still within the statistically significant range. At what point? No. Practically, what do I do with this information? Do I continue to run my A/B tests in the way that I have been running them? So do I continue to look for statistical significance in?
Okay,
And
this
do
is
I
a
test control?
very good question. So let's talk about this. So first, I want you to notice a couple of things. If I generate more lines, again, you start to see the shape of this process, and you see that it kind of tends to become more narrow as traffic and time increases, right? But it never gets small, unlike what people think. Like after 12 weeks of testing, and I can guarantee you that nobody's testing for 12 weeks. That's too long, especially now with cookies that disappear. So after 12 weeks, the range is still like here from 0 to, well, how much we have here? 18%. So the range of this, the band in which you could measure weeks. So your error is still massive. It's not true that if you run it long enough, it converges to the real lift. This is a myth. It's not true. What is true, though, is that if you look at this, like the error of the zero lift, which is the one we base statistical significance on, it also gets smaller. And at some point, your line here will be outside of that gray area. This is true. This is the concept of statistical significance and sample size, okay? The bigger the sample, the higher the probability that this line, the black line, will be outside the gray area. And this is what we try to catch with statistical significance. But it remains that there are some runs, like this one here, the third one, that will never be statistically significant. And they are generated by the same process. Okay? So what I'm saying is that even statistical significance doesn't save the day. It makes things worse. Why? Because you will throw away most winners because you're waiting for too long. And some winners don't ever cross. Look, we have already two here that they never get statistically significant, even if there is an uplift that it's 8.3% for sure in this case.
So that makes it
So, sorry, going on.
I know I was going to say that does make sense to me, because I remember that while at Sky, we would always hear about, oh, this was statistically significant. And you never really stop and question, what does that actually mean? You just automatically start assuming the tool is correct. While this
The
shows
tool is
you,
based on math, so there's no
yeah,
question that the tool is correct.
it's just that with this one, it's showing you that in the different worlds where this could have happened and the different outcomes, given the exact same results, it's showing you that in all actuality, with the noise, it's not telling you what you actually think it's telling you.
Yes. So it's the outcome is not the same. This is the entire point. The underlying conversion rates are the same, but the outcomes are different because the noise is pushing the observed lift, observed conversion rates, whichever you want to use, it's pushing them up or down. And this moves the observed lift. And so if you run it several times, you will always measure different lifts. There is no case where you run one experiment twice and you measure the same lift. This is what I'm saying.
So what I've done in the past is obviously you run A versus B. A is control, B is the hypothesis, the challenger, champion challenger approach. And then the uplift, I only really accept the uplift that arrives above statistical significance. So I think that's one thing, is that the uplift, I don't take the uplift against the zero. I take the uplift against what is actually statistically significant in terms of uplift. So the uplift might be 8%, but the statistical significant uplift might only be 3. So that's kind of one thing I've approached. But what's interesting is the second point you made, is which some results are still real uplift, but they never achieve statistical significance.
Exactly.
So practically speaking, I guess there's 2 questions. One is my approach okay, that I review uplift only above what is statistically significant and reject anything that isn't? Or is there an alternative approach where I can look at those 2 results, for example, that are sat in the gray area and never achieve statistical significance? Is there anything I can do with those, or are we saying that I will never know?
That's a beautiful question. So let's talk about statistical significance and how to use, if we should use it or not. So first, statistical significance, like in the 95% statistical significance at the 95% confidence level comes from medical field, where we talk about clinical trials and people living or dying. So that's a very high bar. In business, there is no such thing as certainty. Like if you run a campaign, you don't know if it's gonna work or not. So we take risks. So pretending that split testing should give you a certainty of near certainty because it's statistical significance, in my opinion, it's wrong in principle. So statistical significance was never built for business. And this is well, it's a point, it's a concept. But so from a practical point of view, what happens? I show you that the bar is very high. So many winners will never make it because they have adversarial noise that pushes them down. So they will never raise above the line of statistical significance, which again here in the chart is the gray area. All right. So many winners will not make it there. And so this means you are actually throwing away winners that are real winners, but your methodology for evaluating the results cannot detect them. Okay. And so what do I suggest? I suggest to use this tool here, which is noise check, which is especially built to help teams to understand if you are looking at a real effect or this effect you see it's due to noise. This works with split tests or KPIs. You can use for both. And so in this view here, you see the same numbers we have in the chart. So it's these numbers here for A and B, and you see this is how it is. And you see here that with these particular numbers, it tells you that this can look like a 6.24. Let me see. Sorry, we have it. This should be 20. Okay, so this is the chart. Got it wrong. So this one is the chart. So in this case, this is likely higher, and you have a probability of a real change of 90%, which is not like statistical significance with the p-value of 0.05. Statistical significance is 97.5%, right? Here we are at 90%. But this system here, it tells you that there might be an effect, and it catches it before statistical significance. All right. So you lose less winners, because when you run many simulations to try to basically this is a decision policy that the company adopts, right? If you run this on 10,000 experiments, you will see that this wins against the traditional statistical significance, because the traditional statistical significance filters out too many winners. You are leaving money on the table. That's the point.
Because the benchmark is too high. And I like this graph because it gives you the noise on either side, so that the paler of the two bars, is that standard deviation? What is that we're looking at that's giving us?
So you have it down here. There is the explanation. So you are seeing this solid area. This is 25%, and this is 75% probability. And the faded one is here 5%, and here is 95%. Okay, so this bar is 90% of probability, where the value actually can be, and of course the middle one here is 50%.
It's like slap bang. I did. Sorry, I was laughing because you sort of said, and it's explained below, and then you showed us. I was like, I don't know what any of that means.
Yeah, I show you. I mean, if you guys are watching the video, you can see the tool. You can go. Here is all the explanation of how the tool works.
I think I would need an explainer as to what any of that means. But
yeah. Sorry, when you know your things, you cannot skip steps.
So, can you have an explainer for the explainer?
So I will change this number real quick. So let's suppose instead of 520 conversions, we have 510 on the variation. Now we go back to this case where the tool tells you this can look like a plus 6.25% improvement, but it is most likely noise. You see? So this is the goal of this tool, is to help people understand if they're looking at a real change or not. Because if this was a KPI and you just ran a campaign and you see numbers are going up plus 6%, like the marketing team is celebrating, but this celebration shouldn't be happening, because this is noise, most likely noise. It's not that you did something that moved the needle.
I have a question, and it probably comes from my sort of lack of understanding of the statistics, because it looks like you've in order to generate that graph, you've essentially got 4 numbers, the numerator, the denominator, and basically split into A and B. Does trend over time add anything to that from a statistical perspective? Because I always look at graphs and I look at, A versus B trended by days, and then the days are breaking it into pots basically, and so I'm My understanding is
that is
splitting it into individual subplots adds something to the statistical process.
it does not. And I tell you because I've tried in every possible way, simulating tens of thousands of experiments every time. And I also was of the opinion that if you segment the data, you are actually using more information. But I proved myself that this is not true. And like if you talk to a statistician, they will tell you that no, this is a stochastic process, is very well defined, is very well known, and 4 numbers give you everything. And it doesn't matter how you slice it, if it's Monday or Tuesday or whatever, the result will be the same. Like the cumulative numbers give you the full picture. There's no way you can slice it in a different way.
So for my benefit, kind of understanding what that means. So when I look at something and I'm looking at standard deviation on a day-by-day basis, so this is I take the average over the whole time period, and then I look at how much it goes over and above that average. Basically, that's essentially pointless, and actually you can just figure it out from the top level numbers, and it's all about volume, the volume in the test.
Yeah, it's the cumulative of the traffic, visitors, and conversions. That's it. And just let me explain one nuance here, because otherwise people say that I'm wrong. You can have days of the week where you have a different conversion rate. That is true. Like in some businesses, weekends convert better. In some businesses, weekends convert worse. Then there are cases where, for example, you launch something, a campaign, then on that specific day, you will have a different conversion rate. So this is real. I'm not saying that it's not. But if you average, like exclude the random campaigns, exclude that. If you take your traffic weekly, so you have weekdays and weekends, and you average that over 4 weeks, the average of the 4 weeks contains all the information you need. You don't need to separate the weekdays from weekends, and that's unnecessary complexity.
So if I play that back for my brain to understand, things can deviate from day to day, but the way in which they deviate from day to day when trended out over a long enough period is not special in any way. There is a mathematical principle, which is stochastic noise, that explains the deviation from the mean. You do not need to look at that deviation from the mean on a day-to-day basis, because that essentially is an arbitrary split. You could do it by hour, you could do it by minute, it doesn't make any difference.
Correct.
The deviation from the mean is a mathematical principle, which is precisely what you're describing, which is stochastic noise. So looking at deviation from the mean on a day-by-day basis is pointless, because you can take the mathematical principle of stochastic noise and apply it to the 4 numbers, volume conversions in A, volume conversions in B, and it will apply without having all of that day-by-day split knowledge.
Correct. And I'll tell you one thing more. The more you segment, the more you reduce the sample size you're working with, and the more you increase noise, because
The greater deviation you get, yes, of course, makes sense.
So that is it's the opposite of what you want to do.
Yeah.
You want to decrease noise as much as possible, so you need to use larger segments, ideally one, the entire period.
So why would you split it by day arbitrarily? Nobody said that the day was the correct measure in which to split. Yeah, okay, no, I get it. It makes sense.
So I'll walk you through this real quick. So this is the example where it's just noise. Then there is the example where you get a probable increase. So this is around 84% in probability of a real change. So that's the probability of detection, all right? Now this is not random. If somebody like listening knows something about signal and noise, this is basically when the signal to noise ratio is 1, which means we have as much signal as much noise. Okay, they are the same measure. Before this, so when this number here, probability is less than 84%, you have more noise than signal. So you shouldn't make a call because it's still too noisy. So from a practical point of view, what we call signal here is basically the distance between the two means on this chart here. Okay, so the distance here is the signal, and the noise is the width of the entire thing here. Actually, it's the half width. It's from here to the end.
And I guess the lower the sample size, the greater the noise can be because you are less.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So as the sample size increases, the uncertainty decreases. So these bars you see here, they become shorter. And if the mean doesn't move, then the signal stays steady, the noise goes down, and the signal to noise ratio increases. And that's how this probability gets to 84%.
So let's demonstrate that. Could you chuck a 0 into, so instead of being 12,000, let's make it 120,000, and instead of being 480, let's make
Yeah.
4,800. And I just want to see those bars get a
So
lot.
I will just put here one more 0, and then I will put here one more 0. So the conversion rate is the same, but now the sample size is much bigger. If I run it, you see the blue bar is much smaller. So this is the control. Basically, now the control has a lot more people inside than the variation.
So this is interesting because something that we always advise for personalization programs is, and you've kind of exactly described it, is that you always maintain a control, but you don't need to make, you're fairly sure that your personalization program is going to work. And so you reduce the size of that control over time. So basically that A versus B, if we take that in terms of testing you're not testing an A/B test scenario. You're now testing a model. What model A versus model B? So model A is that you don't apply any personalization, and the other way around, because you increase the size of model A. Model A is the one where you do apply personalization, and model B is the control that you maintain, which is much smaller. The observed range in model in B, which is the control, is much larger because that's a smaller sample size. But fundamentally, you can always maintain a control within any personalization program to test that the model still works.
Yes.
Because the control doesn't receive any personalization. So long as you can maintain users within that group, that control could stay at 10%, which is basically what we've got here. The 12,000 is 10% of 120,000. You could have a 10% control, and yes, the observed the noise would be a much larger within the control group, but so long as you have sufficient volume going through the
Yeah, so that is, I mean, if you use tools on the internet to do the math with statistical significance, you have to be very careful because the calculation of power, which is another concept, they are calibrated for a 50-50 split. So if you have 10%, 90% split in traffic, those numbers are completely wrong.
Yes.
But with this approach, which is a graphic approach, this always works. And you see that in this particular case, you get 91% probability, and you see that the median here is still within the uncertainty band of the variation. You see?
But the probability outweighs the noise. And the reason I apply that to a personalization program as an example is because from a practical point of view, if you think that a personalization program is going to generate significant revenue benefit and you want to test your model against control, you don't want a 50-50 split. Because if you think the personalization is going to work,
Yeah, you are leaving money on the table.
you're leaving money on the table. So
Yeah,
something like
I
this makes a
understand.
huge amount of sense. Because a 90-10 split where you favor personalization, it still allows you to test the model and to prove a probability of 90.
Yeah, so if the gap, if the signal, no, the gap between A and B is big enough, then yes, you can measure it, even if one of the uncertainty is bigger. And you get to some point where, let's put the 20 here and see what happens. You see, now this is already a different situation. Why? Because the two means don't live within the band of uncertainty anymore, you see? So now this is likely higher. We are at 96%. So for me, this is already, I would call this a winner. I don't wait here to have 97.5%. That would be the canonical statistical significance. But when you are in this situation, the likelihood that the real result, really in this tiny overlapping area, is just 4%. And again, we in business, we make decisions all the time on a coin flip. So why this should be different?
No, 100%. I get that completely. I think in something like a personalization program, you would keep adding more in and gradually phase your other models out. So you're no longer testing A versus B. I'm not explaining myself very well, but I think you know what I mean. It's you always maintain that control that never receives personalization, but you're testing one model versus another. So you might have multiple versions of a personalization model that you want to test, and you want to validate them against each other, but you also want to validate them against no personalization at all.
Of course.
Okay. Which this approach allows you to do because you can have different sample sizes essentially.
So, and essentially what this tool here does, noise check, is like if you have KPIs or experiments, if you come on the page here, you can decide, is it an experiment or just KPI? You input your numbers here, again, 4 numbers, and then you click here, check the noise, and it will tell you whether it's noise or it's a plausible effect. As simple as that.
Brilliant. No, I like it. Makes a lot of sense.
Awesome.
I decided to keep the noise down and just stay quiet and just enjoy the conversation there. No, but I think this is absolutely amazing, and I do love the fact of just how simple it is as well. Everyone can handle 4 numbers.
Yeah. And I tell you, I know experts that they prefer to go with their gut feeling and start to analyze segments, right? Because I think that gives you some degree of control, but it's imaginary control because again, every time you split, you go these two smaller segments, you are increasing the noise. So your choice, whatever it is, it's less stable. And why would we want that? We definitely don't want to make less stable choices. So we have to strive to use the largest sample size we can. And again, it's a business. It's not like a laboratory. So we are bounded by time. We can run an experiment for a few weeks. We cannot run it for months. Then there is the problem of cookies. Like today, cookies last in some cases less than 7 days. That's a real problem. So we need to be real. And an experiment, I believe, 4 to 6 weeks is acceptable, but more than that, it becomes a gamble because you're losing cookies. So,
And I guess two questions that sort of jump out at me. One, we've kind of gone back into the A/B testing A versus B, maintaining a control. What is your view on? Because a lot of people are still doing time-based, where literally they make a change to 100% of the user base and then expect to be able to measure it. Now, in my view, this helps, but fundamentally, like let's say you're working with a business that does a Black Friday thing, and you make a change in the lead up to Black Friday, and you look at time-based changes. Fundamentally, you're not considering the fact that conversion rate changes significantly. So, what's your view on time-based experiments?
so I have run experiments with different companies in all the months of the year. And what I can tell you for sure is that, okay, first, the time-based approach is not reliable. because you have like fluctuations in traffic, in conversion rate. You do have them. So it is always better. And I mean, split testing is the only way to compare oranges with oranges. That's in a nutshell, that's what it is. And the Black Friday thing, now Black Friday is one. We have many of these holidays throughout the year. But you should not run experiments on Black Friday. Why? Because the intent is different. Like the behavior of people is different. So you cannot extend the learnings to the entire year. So running an experiment on Black Friday and say you learn something is wrong, because Black Friday is a very particular moment that doesn't extend to the rest of the year.
I think what's fun with, well, it's not fun, it's bloody awful, but what's fun with that example is development windows, so team development windows, business development windows tend to run up to a deadline like Black Friday or Christmas. And so development teams build and build and build and build and build up until the deadline that may be 2 weeks before Black Friday, and then stop. And so there'll be this huge release where a number of different features that everybody's been pushing for, as we need to get it in before Black Friday, it has to go live before Black Friday, gets developed and dropped. And then the expectation is that you'll be able to monitor uplift from this huge swathe of changes. And so you've got a double whammy that multiple different changes have been released all at the same time, and they've been released just before Black Friday. And so then the assumption, or Christmas or whatever, and so the ability to measure whether or not they were remotely successful is compounded by the fact that you released 5 things at once.
Yeah, that's a problem by itself.
It's just like
Yeah,
double.
but I mean, I'm guilty myself for running experiments on Black Friday, and that's why I'm telling you that you shouldn't, because what you measure, it's complete. It goes one way, could have gone the other. Like, people are unpredictable, and what they do on Black Friday is not generally what they do the rest of the year. So that's the point.
Yeah, I think I think the fun thing for us as consultants is you are swimming against the current of the business operation, which is we're going to release everything just before Black Friday.
No, I mean, I'm not saying don't release, but don't try to split test it. And just trust your changes, and be happy. You can totally do that. But split testing on Black Friday, it's a very bad practice.
By
If
all
you're not
release, but don't expect to be able to measure whether or not it was successful.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what I was gonna say. It's not so much that you're split testing at that point. In the scenario that Matt was talking about, you're releasing all these new features saying, "We need to get this in for Black Friday because we know this is going to be beneficial." They put it in 2 weeks before Black Friday. They see this huge conversion rate because Black Friday is where everyone's coming and spending the money, but yet you're not being able to find out, did that huge increase in conversion was due to these new features that you introduce versus just due to the nature of how people are shopping on Black Friday? Was it due to your sale? I mean, that gives me like example, like something I had earlier this week where a client would say that there was an issue with collection because they had some spike in this one particular type of product. And when you go on and look, and you will tell them, well, could it be the fact that you have a 65% off on that particular product that you're saying that there's an issue on? And they didn't take into account that when there is this great sale, people are going to be drawn to it.
Yeah. I can tell you one more thing about these releases. So this is very important. I have a white paper on this, which has even been like kind of vetted and approved by some of the most some professor at the Columbia University. Anyway, the point is this, that there is what I call first exposure contamination. And that is the phenomenon when a person has seen the control before they see the variation. Okay, so they have been on the site already, they have seen the control, and at some point you release something different. That could be an experiment, it could be a new version, and this person, just because they're seeing something different, this is what makes them convert. It's not that A is better than B. That is the steady state effect. This is what the business wants to measure. Is B better than A? But what you are really measuring, if you don't filter out the people who already have seen the control, is just you measure the novelty. Like B is new, so it converts. You see the difference?
Interesting. But then that's an argument for creating new content. So if you could split those two things out and differentiate between the group who had seen the control before versus the ones who were net new, you could make an argument for two things. You could say, well, the A/B test didn't work, but new content does work, so let's produce more new content.
Correct. And GTM Split, by the way, which is the tool I created that is free, it runs in Google Tag Manager and it splits the traffic. GTM Split does this. You have a flag that you can use to flag people who have seen the control before you started the experiment. And then in the analytics, you can split the two groups and you can make this sort of observations. Yes.
Fantastic.
So let me add one little thing to this, that the problem is that even if you measure an uplift with the release, this uplift is destined to go to zero. Why? Because at some point you run out of returning users. You see? At some point, all the people who saw the control now see the variation, and the variation is the new control. And so that's why we have this problem with the experiments, that people run an experiment, they find a winner, but then over time, this lift that you measured, it simply disappears. And this is the first exposure contamination. It's the novelty effect, that when you run out of returning users, you lose the lift.
Yeah. No, really interesting. Thank you.
Yep. Now, I think we probably should go ahead and wrap it up because we do need to keep it just about 1 hour. Andrew,
It's my fault. Apologies. I have two children, one of which is asleep, but both of them want me to put them to bed. So the other one, who doesn't go to sleep, is getting towards the time where I need to put him to sleep as well. So I am very sorry. But I know it's like 2 hours later for you as well. It's like super late for you.
That's okay.
so is there any final thoughts that you will want to leave the audience with regarding noise or GTM split?
Oh, well, it was you said fun part. Fun part it was to develop all these things. Like GTM Split, I'll give you one little fact about GTM Split. So I developed the engine of GTM Split when I was working with a client, and you know that at some point Google optimized disappeared, and we needed to test anyway, right? So she has this client. She has a huge site. They have 2 million visitors per month. And they were asked, they were quoted like 5K per month for split testing. And I said, come on, give me 2 weeks, I'll find a way. And so in 2 weeks, I developed this engine in Tag Manager. And in 2 years, she saved like $100K in SaaS fee that she didn't pay to these vendors, because we were using our own solution. And then at some point, I realized, okay, if I can save 100K to one client, what if I make it like open code and I give it away? I can save a lot of money to a lot of people. And that's when I refactored the code, and now it's just a container. It's a GTM container. You can install it, and then you can run the experiments. There is a UI, so it's completely free. and it is very robust compared to other like mainstream tools, because it's just JavaScript that runs in the browser immediately. Once the GTM container is loaded, it's synchronous, so it doesn't have dependencies. It's really a beautiful piece of software.
Amazing. And afterwards, I would love to get the link to that just so I could put that in the show notes. But
Yeah.
with that, I just wanted to say, Andrea, thank you for taking time out, especially because I know you've had a very long day and it's now already the very next day for you.
Yeah.
So the true meaning of digital after dark.
Yeah.
Matt, thank you so much for joining us. And I think with one thing that this podcast has definitely shown, that noise isn't always bad. The noise that we've been doing right here has been absolutely brilliant. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a really, for my part, it's been an extremely interesting discussion. You've helped to clarify a number of things that like you could tell I was just sort of asking questions, and then you're giving me the answers back. It's been really, really interesting for me because it's outside of my immediate sphere of expertise. So very, very good to sort of sit and have this conversation with you. I've enjoyed it a lot.
Well, thank you again for having me. It's a pleasure to share these things. Again, we should look at noise a little bit more in depth, because it's important. Essentially it makes us make wrong decisions if we don't factor in the noise. So that's the message.
Brilliant.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, audience, for making it this far. Good night.
No.